Users can fill those forms, entries to insert the new data or fill the certain entries, and the DBMS will retrieve matching data for those remaining entries. Next are the graphical user interfaces. It is a schema to the user. In diagrammatic form, the user can specify a query by manipulating the diagram. Most graphical user interface use a pointing device, for example mouse. Natural language interfaces are those interfaces which accept the request which are written in English or any other language which is easy to understand by them. Interfaces for parametric users are for repeated work. These are the interfaces which are used for repeated work by different users. And interfaces for DBAs means database administrators are those interfaces which are provided to administrators for privileged commands to provide them some sort of authority and authentication. The user friendly DBMS interfaces are menu based, which are popular for browsing on internet. These are form based, which are designed for naive users. These are graphic based using mouse, and these are the combination of above three kind of interfaces. Next are the database system utilities. Most of the DBMS have database utilities that help the database administrators in managing the databases. For example, loading, which are used to load existing files into the database. For example, they can be text files which can be loaded into the database. The source and the target structures are specified to the utility which reformat and stores the data. Backup, the backup copy of the database by dumping entire data onto the tape file. It can be used to restore data in case of disaster or different types. File reorganization, which reorganize a database file into a different file organization to improve the performance of the database. Performance monitoring, which monitors the database usage and provide the statistics for decision making. The tools and applications environments and the communication facilities in the databases available are the other tools available to database designers, users and database administrators are case tools, which are used for the designing of database. Data dictionary, which is used to store the catalog information and other information such as decisions, usage standards, application programs, descriptions and user information. The application development tools include Power Builder, Designer 2000, etc. These are becoming quite popular because of their feature graphical user interface development, querying and updating, and application program development. Next is the classification of the database management system, in which several criteria are used to classify database management system. One is the database model on which DBMS is based. They can be either relational database model or object database model. Depending upon the number of user which is supported by the system, they can be single user database system, there can be multi-user database system. Depending upon the number of sites over which the database is distributed, a DBMS is centralized if the data is stored at that single computer site. A distributed DBMS can have the actual database and DBMS at a particular site, and depending upon the cost of the DBMS, depending upon the type of the access path which is used for storing the files. Next comes the DBMS component modules. A DBMS is a complex software system. The figure showed in the next slide is divided into two parts. The top part represents the users of database system and the lower part represents the internal of the DBMS used for storing and data, storing of the data and processing of the transaction. This is the diagram representing the upper half and the lower half. In the upper half, it is represented what are the various kind of users, and in the lower half, it is represented that how the data is physically stored in various areas and how the transactions are performed. The centralized database management architecture is that in which all the database management functionality, application program execution and user interfacing processing is carried out on a single machine. This is the physical centralized architecture having terminals which interact with the software or hardware through network. These are the different display monitors which interact with hardwares and softwares and operating systems with the help of network. The basic client server architecture is that architecture which was developed to deal with computer environment in which a large number of PCs, workstations and file servers were used. A client in this framework is typically a user machine which provide user interface capabilities and local processing. A server is a system which contain both the hardware and the softwares that can provide services to the client machines. Logical two-tier client server architecture. This is the diagram showing two-tier architecture of the client server architecture logically, having multiple clients, having different servers like printer server, file server, DBMS server interacting with each other through a single network. This is a logical two-tier client server architecture. It is called two-tier architecture because the software components are distributed over two systems. One is client, other is server. And the emergence of web changed the role of client and server, leading to the three-tier architecture. In the two-tier architecture, we use only two parties which are client or server, but by the development of internet or the web, we came to provide three-tier architecture which is having a intermediate layer or the middle layer, which is sometimes known as application server or web server. The three-tier architecture can enhance the security. The database server only accessible via middle tier, and the clients cannot directly access the database server. As in two-tier architectures, the client and server interact directly with each other without any intermediate layer, but in case of three-tier architecture, we are having a intermediate layer which is a middle layer known as web server or application server, which will provide the interaction of clients and servers. Means the clients can not directly communicate with the database server, they have to communicate with each other via application server only. This is the diagram showing the three-tier client server architecture in which we are having clients, for example graphical user interfaces, and application server or web server and database server. Here the database servers communicate with the clients with the help of web server or application server. In this diagram you can say graphical user web interfaces directly interact with the application program or web pages, and then they communicate with DBMS. Similarly, this is the presentation layer. This is the business logic layer, which is the intermediate layer between database service layer and presentation layer. The three-tier architecture, the presentation layer displays the information to the user. The business logic layer handles the intermediate rules and constraints before the data is passed up to the user and down to the DBMS. Means business logic layer will provide data to the presentation layer or to the database service layer. If the bottom layer is split into two layers, a web server and a database server, then it becomes again a four-tier architecture, which is also possible to become n-tier architecture. Means database service layer can further be divided into web layer and web server layer and the database layer, then it becomes four-tier architecture. Thanks.